What if I told you that we've been receiving structured intelligence signals from Mars since 2003, and that I was part of the team that first detected them? My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and for the past 20 years, I've been bound by the most classified non-disclosure agreement in NASA's history. But today, that changes. I'm 67 years old now, retired, and frankly, I don't care about the consequences anymore. The world deserves to know what we found, what we've been hiding, and why 3 members of my original team have died under mysterious circumstances in the past 5 years. Before I begin, I want you to understand something. I spent 35 years of my life dedicated to space exploration. I have a PhD in astrophysics from MIT. I've worked on Mars rover missions, and I've been part of SETI since its early days. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a scientist. And what I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you think you know about our place in the universe. This story begins in November 2003 at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. But to understand what happened that day, I need to take you back a little further, to when everything started to change. I joined NASA in 1995, fresh out of graduate school, full of dreams about discovering life beyond Earth. Back then, the agency was different. We were genuinely focused on exploration, on pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. There was an innocence to our work that I miss terribly now. My specialty was radio astronomy and signal analysis. I spent countless nights listening to the cosmos, analyzing radio waves from distant galaxies, searching for patterns, for signs of intelligence in the vast emptiness of space. Most of the time, you hear nothing but cosmic background radiation. The universe's white noise, we called it. But occasionally, you'd detect something interesting. A pulsar's rhythmic beat. Radio waves from a dying star. In 20 years of listening, I'd catalogued thousands of natural phenomena, learned to distinguish between artificial human interference and genuine cosmic signals. I thought I'd heard everything the universe had to offer. I was wrong. In early 2003, I was assigned to a new project, monitoring Mars during its closest approach to Earth in 60,000 years. It was a routine assignment, really. We were supporting the Mars Express mission and the twin rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, that were launching that summer. My job was simple: monitor radio frequencies for any interference that might affect our missions, and keep an ear open for anything unusual. The European Space Agency was launching Mars Express, and we wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything important during this historic close approach. For months, everything was normal. Mars was just Mars, a cold, dead rock, broadcasting nothing but the occasional atmospheric static. Then came November 15th, 2003. It was 2:47 a.m. local time. I remember the exact minute because I logged everything meticulously. I was alone in the control room. The night shift was always quiet, just me and the gentle hum of the equipment. I was monitoring the 1420 megahertz frequency band, what we call the water hole in radio astronomy. It's the frequency that hydrogen naturally emits, and many scientists believe it's the most likely frequency for extraterrestrial communication, because any intelligent civilization would know about hydrogen. At first, it was just a slight uptick in the background noise. I almost dismissed it as equipment malfunction or terrestrial interference. But something made me look closer. The signal was incredibly faint, almost buried in the cosmic background radiation, but it had structure. It wasn't random noise. I isolated the frequency and ran it through our analysis software. What I saw on my screen made my blood run cold. The signal was pulsing in a pattern, not the regular, predictable rhythm of a pulsar, but something far more complex. It was almost like Morse code, but infinitely more sophisticated. I spent the next 3 hours analyzing that signal, running every test I could think of. I checked for satellite interference, atmospheric distortion, equipment malfunction, everything. But the signal remained consistent, structured, and clearly artificial. The most shocking discovery came when I ran a directional analysis. The signal wasn't coming from deep space, from some distant galaxy. It was coming from Mars, specifically from the Cydonia region, the area where that famous Face on Mars formation is located. I sat there, staring at my monitors until sunrise, afraid to move, afraid that if I blinked, the signal would disappear. And I'd convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But it didn't disappear. It got stronger. At 6 a.m., I called my supervisor, Dr. Robert Hayes. Bob had been with NASA for 30 years, a no-nonsense guy who'd seen every kind of false alarm you could imagine. I expected him to tell me to get some sleep and check my equipment. Instead, he was at the facility within an hour, bringing 2 other senior scientists with him. They ran their own tests, confirmed my findings, and within 6 hours, we had a full team working on the signal. The pattern was incredibly complex. It consisted of mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, and what appeared to be geometric proofs. But embedded within these mathematical foundations was something else, something that looked almost like instructions. Dr. Hayes made a call to Washington. Within 12 hours, we had a team of cryptographers, linguists, and computer scientists flown in from various government agencies. Some I recognized as NASA personnel. Others wore no identification and wouldn't tell us who they worked for. That's when I knew we'd stumbled onto something bigger than a scientific discovery. This was now a matter of national security. For 3 weeks, our expanded team worked around the clock to decode the signal. We were confined to the facility. No one was allowed to leave. No outside communication was permitted. They told our families we were on an extended research mission in a remote location with no phone service. The breakthrough came from Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a linguistics professor from UCLA who'd been brought in because of her work with artificial languages and mathematical communication systems. She noticed that the signal wasn't just sending information. It was teaching us how to understand it. The first part of each transmission was like a primer, establishing basic mathematical concepts, then building up to more complex ideas. It was exactly what human scientists had proposed we should do if we ever tried to communicate with an extraterrestrial civilization. As we decoded more of the signal, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The transmission wasn't just saying, "Hello, we exist." It was a warning. The message, as best we could translate it, described a civilization that had once thrived on Mars millions of years ago. They had achieved spaceflight, had visited other worlds in our solar system, and had established what we might call an interplanetary civilization. But something had gone wrong. The transmission described a catastrophic climate change event, not natural climate change, but something artificially induced. the Martian civilization had apparently engaged in planetary engineering projects that went horribly wrong, stripping away their atmosphere and turning their world into the frozen desert we see today. The most chilling part was the warning embedded in the message. We see you making the same mistakes. We see your world warming. We see you poisoning your air and water. Learn from our failure or share our fate. As word of our discovery reached higher levels of government, the tone of our mission changed dramatically. Scientists were replaced by military personnel and intelligence officers. Our research was compartmentalized. No one person was allowed to see the full picture anymore. I was reassigned to a different project and told that my work on the Mars signal was now classified at the highest levels. I signed documents that basically said I'd spend the rest of my life in prison if I ever spoke about what we'd discovered. But they couldn't stop me from continuing to monitor that frequency on my own time. And what I discovered over the following months was even more disturbing than the original message. The signals weren't just historical records. They were real-time communications. Someone or something on Mars was actively trying to communicate with Earth. And based on the increasing urgency and complexity of the messages, they were getting frustrated that we weren't responding. For the next 15 years, I quietly monitored Mars communications from my home observatory. I developed my own equipment, learned to hide my activities from the surveillance that I knew was constant. The government had made it clear that my retirement was conditional on my continued silence. The signals evolved over time. What started as historical warnings became more personal, more direct. By 2010, the transmissions included detailed information about Earth's environmental systems, about our cities, our populations, our technology. Whoever was sending these signals had been watching us very carefully. In 2015, something changed. The signals became shorter, more urgent. The mathematical language was replaced by something that looked almost desperate. If I had to characterize the tone, I'd say they were pleading with us. Then, in 2018, they stopped. For 3 years, nothing. The frequency that had been active for 15 years went silent. I thought maybe whatever civilization was trying to communicate with us had given up, or perhaps had died out. But in September 2021, the signals returned, and they were different. Angry. The mathematical elegance was gone, replaced by harsh, repetitive patterns that felt almost like shouting. The message, as best I could decode it, was simple and terrifying. Time is running out. I wasn't the only member of the original team who'd been monitoring the signals privately. Dr. Hayes had retired in 2010, but maintained his own listening post. Dr. Rodriguez had returned to UCLA, but continued her translation work in secret. In 2018, Bob Hayes died in what was reported as a car accident. Single vehicle, late at night, on a straight stretch of highway he'd driven thousands of times. The police report said he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Lisa Rodriguez died of a heart attack in the 2020. She was 52, in perfect health, a marathon runner. No family history of heart disease. The autopsy found traces of an exotic compound in her bloodstream that the coroner couldn't identify. Dr. Michael Foster, our signal analysis specialist, was found dead in his apartment in 2021. Apparent suicide, they said. Except Mike had just gotten engaged and was planning his wedding. He'd called me 2 days before his death, excited about a breakthrough he'd made in translating the newer, more urgent signals. 3 deaths in 5 years. 3 members of a team that had originally consisted of only 7 people. The remaining 4 of us stopped communicating with each other after Mike's funeral. The message was clear. Stay silent or face the consequences. But I'm 67 years old now. I've lived through cancer, divorce, and the loss of most of my friends to old age or worse. What are they going to do to me that life hasn't already done? More importantly, the signals have changed again. Over the past 6 months, they've become more frequent, more intense, and for the first time, they're not coming just from the Cydonia region. We're receiving transmissions from multiple locations across Mars. Last month, I detected something that made me decide to break my silence. Embedded in the latest transmission was a countdown. Mathematical, unmistakable, and currently sitting at approximately 18 months. I don't know what happens when that countdown reaches 0. But based on 20 years of monitoring these signals, based on the increasing urgency and the clear frustration in the communications, I don't think it's going to be good news for Earth. You might wonder why the government has kept this secret for so long. The official reason, as explained to me in 2003, was to prevent mass panic. They argued that humanity wasn't ready to learn that we're not alone, especially if that news came with warnings about environmental disaster. But I think the real reason is more mundane. They don't know what to do with the information. How do you respond to a dead civilization's warnings about environmental collapse when your entire economy is built on the activities they're warning you about? How do you tell the world that there might still be intelligent life on Mars when you've spent decades telling everyone it's a dead planet? More troubling is what I learned through my contacts still inside NASA. The agency has been receiving these signals all along, but they've been actively suppressing research into their meaning. Several young researchers have been reassigned or dismissed when they got too close to the truth. Based on 20 years of translations, I can paint a picture of what Mars was like before the catastrophe. It was a blue world with oceans and continents, not unlike Earth. The civilization that evolved there was technologically advanced, but made the same mistakes we're making now. They industrialized rapidly, altered their climate through massive engineering projects, and ignored the warnings of their own scientists until it was too late. The final messages from their historical records describe a civilization in its death throes, watching their atmosphere bleed away into space, while their leaders argued about economics and politics. Sound familiar? But here's what's most disturbing. The recent signals suggest that some of them survived. Somehow, some portion of their civilization has persisted in underground facilities, possibly for millions of years, watching and waiting. And now they're watching us repeat their mistakes, and they're running out of patience. The countdown I mentioned began transmitting in March of this year. It's embedded in every signal we receive, a persistent mathematical sequence that decreases by 1 approximately every 36 hours. I've calculated that it will reach 0 in approximately 18 months from now. I don't know what that represents, but the tone of the signals has become increasingly desperate as the number gets smaller. My best guess, based on the context of the messages, is that it represents some kind of intervention timeline. Perhaps they've decided that subtle warnings aren't enough anymore. Perhaps they're planning to reveal themselves directly or take more drastic action to prevent us from destroying our planet the way they destroyed theirs. I'm telling you this story because I believe humanity deserves to know what's coming. We have, at most, 18 months to figure out how to respond to the reality that we're not alone and that our neighbors are not happy with our behavior. I'm also speaking out because I'm probably going to die soon. Not from natural causes. I'm in good health for my age. But 3 of my former colleagues have already been silenced, and I doubt the powers that be will allow a 4th to keep talking for very long. If something happens to me in the coming weeks or months, please remember this story. Please remember that there are forces within our own government that would rather maintain their power structures than deal with the implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. I don't know what the Martians, and yes, I believe that's what they are, have planned for when their countdown reaches 0. But I do know that ignoring them hasn't worked. 20 years of pretending we haven't received their messages hasn't made them go away. Maybe it's time to start listening. Maybe it's time to start responding. Maybe it's time to admit that we need help from those who've walked this path before us, even if that path led them to disaster. I've prepared copies of all my research, all my recordings, all my translations, and hidden them in secure locations. If something happens to me, others will continue this work. The truth will come out eventually. But I hope it comes out in time for us to do something about it. To anyone in government who might be watching this, the silence has been broken. You can't put this secret back in the box. People deserve to know what's coming, and they deserve the chance to prepare for it. To everyone else, start paying attention to Mars. Start asking your representatives why we're not responding to signals we've been receiving for 20 years. Start demanding transparency from NASA and the other agencies that have been keeping this secret. And most importantly, start taking climate change seriously. Because if the Martians are right, if we continue on our current path, we won't need to worry about their countdown. We'll have destroyed ourselves long before they have a chance to intervene. The choice is ours. But time is running out. Thank you for listening. Please share this story. Please ask questions. Please don't let them silence this truth the way they've silenced so many others. And please, look up at Mars tonight. Look up and remember that someone up there is watching us, waiting to see if we're smart enough to save ourselves, or if they'll have to save us from ourselves. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, signing off. Whatever happens next, at least the truth is finally out there.